I'm Arya Sterling, 22 years old, and last month, my grandfather, Harrison, gifted me his $500 million tech company. What should have been the happiest day of my life quickly turned into a nightmare when my mother, Eleanor, and her new husband, Julian, tried to steal it all away. I never imagined my own mother would betray me, especially after everything Grandpa had done for us. But when she forced me to choose between my inheritance and my home, Grandpa chuckled in a way that sent chills down Julian's spine. If you're reading this, I promise this roller coaster of family betrayal, corporate scheming, and sweet justice is worth every minute. To understand why Grandpa Harrison made me his successor, you need to know our family history. I was raised primarily by my grandfather after my dad, Harrison's only son, died in a car accident when I was 10. My mother, Eleanor, was devastated at first, but within a year, she was more interested in her social life than raising a grieving child. Your mom processes grief differently. Grandpa would explain whenever I'd cry after Eleanor missed another school event. He never spoke ill of her, but his eyes held disappointment. Harrison Sterling was a legend in the Seattle tech scene. He started Sterling Dynamics in his garage in the early 80s with nothing but determination and a brilliant mind. By the time I was born, the company was worth millions, and by my high school graduation, it had expanded internationally with a valuation of over $450 million. Despite his success, Grandpa remained humble and hardworking. "Money doesn't define character, Arya," he'd tell me. "Actions do." After Dad died, I spent weekends and most summers at Grandpa's estate on Lake Washington. While other kids my age were at the mall or pool parties, I was shadowing Harrison through the halls of Sterling Dynamics, absorbing everything I could about the business. By 16, I was helping with basic market research. By 18, I was sitting in on development meetings. The employees watched me grow up and many became like family. I majored in business administration with a minor in computer science at Stanford, working at the company every summer. Grandpa never pressured me to join the family business, but he beamed with pride when I expressed interest in it. "You've got your father's mind and my stubbornness," he'd say. "That's a powerful combination." Meanwhile, my mother Eleanor cycled through a series of increasingly questionable boyfriends. Eleanor was beautiful and charming when she wanted to be, but she had terrible taste in men. After my father, she seemed drawn to men who were his opposite, flashy, irresponsible, and often opportunistic. Then came Julian Vance. He entered our lives 6 months ago when my mother brought him to a family dinner. Julian was different from her usual type. He was a former sales manager at NexusScore, one of our competitors. Polished and articulate, he charmed my mother completely. What Eleanor didn't see, but Grandpa and I immediately noticed, was the calculating look in his eyes as he surveyed our home, asked pointed questions about the company, and seemed more interested in Grandpa's business connections than in building a relationship with us. "I don't trust that man," Grandpa told me privately after dinner. "He's not here for Eleanor," but my mother was infatuated. Within 3 months, they were married in a lavish ceremony that Julian somehow convinced Eleanor to pay for entirely. I stood beside her as maid of honor, forcing a smile while watching Julian's eyes constantly wander to the wealthy guests Grandpa had invited. After the wedding, Julian quit his job, claiming he wanted to focus on being a family man. He began appearing at company functions uninvited, introducing himself as part of the Sterling Dynamics family business. Employees would call me confused after he requested confidential reports or tried to sit in on strategy meetings. During this time, Grandpa's health began declining. He'd never fully recovered from a heart attack 2 years prior, and the stress of watching Julian circle his life's work like a vulture wasn't helping. I began taking on more responsibility at the company, learning everything I could from Grandpa while we still had time. "I'm not worried about the company, Arya," he told me one evening as we reviewed quarterly reports in his home office. "I'm worried about you and your mother when I'm gone." I assured him I could take care of myself, but we both knew Eleanor was vulnerable to manipulation, especially from men like Julian, who seemed to have an uncanny ability to identify and exploit her insecurities. What I didn't know then was that Grandpa had already set a plan in motion, one that would force all of us to show our true colors. My 22nd birthday arrived on a perfect September Saturday. Grandpa had insisted on hosting a gathering at his estate. The sprawling garden was decorated with twinkling lights, and a jazz quartet played near the pool. The guest list included family members, close friends, and several key executives from Sterling Dynamics. Alina and Julian arrived fashionably late. My mother, stunning in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Julian wore a custom suit and that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Happy birthday, darling," Alina air-kissed both my cheeks. "You look lovely. Don't you think she looks lovely, Julian?" Julian nodded, his eyes already scanning the crowd. "Very nice. Is that Markham Hayes from Nexuscore here?" I bit back a retort about his priorities and instead thanked them for coming. Throughout the evening, I noticed Julian cornering various executives, engaging in conversations that made them look increasingly uncomfortable. Around 9:00, Grandpa called for everyone's attention by tapping his glass. The crowd quieted as he made his way to the center of the patio, leaning slightly on his cane. Despite his physical frailty, his voice remained strong and commanding. "First, let's all wish my beautiful granddaughter a happy birthday," he began, leading the crowd in a chorus of happy birthday. I blushed, standing beside him as everyone cheered. "Arya has been the light of my life since the day she was born," Grandpa continued. "After we lost her father, my son, she became even more precious to me." His voice wavered slightly, and I squeezed his hand. "Today, I want to make an announcement," he said, straightening his shoulders. "After nearly 50 years at the helm of Sterling Dynamics, I've decided it's time for me to retire." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was news to everyone, including me. I looked at him in surprise, but he just winked. "A company needs young blood, new ideas, and unwavering integrity to thrive in today's market. I've been blessed to watch Arya grow into a brilliant, hardworking young woman who understands not just the business, but the heart and soul of Sterling Dynamics." My heart began racing as I realized where this was heading. Across the garden, I saw Julian suddenly paying very close attention. "Therefore, as my birthday gift to Arya, I am transferring majority ownership and control of Sterling Dynamics to her, effective immediately." Gasps and exclamations erupted. I stood frozen in shock as Grandpa beamed at me. The company executives who had known me since childhood began applauding. My focus was drawn to my mother and Julian. Alina's smile was tight, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and anger. Julian didn't bother hiding his reaction. His face flushed dark red, his jaw clenched so tight I could see a muscle twitching in his cheek. "Harrison, this is quite unexpected," Alina said, her voice artificially light as she approached us. "Shouldn't we discuss such important family matters privately?" Grandpa's smile never faltered. "There's nothing to discuss, Alina. The paperwork is already finalized." On cue, Marcus Thorne, Grandpa's attorney, stepped forward with a leather portfolio. "Everything is in order, Harrison. We just need Arya's signature." The next hour passed in a blur. I signed document after document, my hand shaking as the magnitude of what was happening sank in. A $500 million company was now my responsibility. Throughout it all, I kept catching glimpses of Julian whispering furiously to my mother, whose celebratory facade was cracking by the minute. I knew they wouldn't let this stand without a fight. As the last guests departed, leaving only family, Alina cornered me, Julian looming behind her like a storm cloud. "We need to talk," she said, her voice clipped. "In the study, now." Julian closed the study door behind us with unnecessary force. The warm, book-lined room that had always been a sanctuary suddenly felt claustrophobic. "What the hell was that?" Alina demanded. "Grandpa's retirement gift, apparently," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is completely irresponsible," Julian interjected, his polished voice abandoned for something harder. "You're barely out of college. You can't possibly run a company of that size." I squared my shoulders. "I've been working at Sterling Dynamics since I was 16. I know the company inside and out." "Working summers is hardly the same as running the entire operation." Alina waved her hand dismissively. "Which is why," Julian said, stepping closer, "we've decided that I'll be taking over as CEO while you learn the ropes." The audacity of it stunned me. "Excuse me?" "It makes perfect sense," Alina continued. "Julian has executive experience. He'll manage day-to-day operations." "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "Grandpa made me the owner and CEO. The paperwork is signed." Julian's facade evaporated. "Listen, you entitled little princess. This company needs experienced leadership, not some girl playing businesswoman because Grandpa felt sorry for her." My hands trembled with anger. "The board has known me my entire life. Many of them have already congratulated me. Support that will evaporate when they realize you're in over your head, he sneered. Be reasonable, Arya. Let me handle the business. I saw it all clearly then. His plan had been to marry my mother, ingratiate himself with Grandpa, and position himself to take over. He just never expected Grandpa to bypass them both. The answer is no, I said. I am the owner and CEO of Sterling Dynamics. Aliner's expression hardened. This isn't just about you, Arya. This is about our family's legacy. Robert and I are trying to protect you from making a huge mistake. By stealing my company? I asked incredulously. It's not stealing when it's family, Julian shot back. But if you want to be difficult, fine. Either you accept our help or you can pack your bags and leave this house. I stared at my mother, waiting for her to contradict this outrageous ultimatum. She didn't. You'd kick me out because I won't let your husband of a few months take over my inheritance, I asked, my voice breaking. This is my house, too, Arya. Aliner's eyes flashed. And Julian is my husband. If you can't respect our position, then yes, you should leave. The betrayal cut deep. My own mother choosing this man over me. Fine, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'll go. As I reached for the handle, a low chuckle came from the doorway. We all turned to see Grandpa standing there, leaning on his cane, but with a fire in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Well, well, he said, his voice deceptively light. Isn't this an interesting family discussion? Julian paled. Harrison, we were just discussing the transition. I heard exactly what you were discussing, Grandpa cut him off. And I must say, Julian, you've shown your hand rather earlier than I expected. He stepped into the room, his gaze shifting to my mother. Aliner, I'm disappointed, though not surprised. Dad, please, Aliner began, but Grandpa held up his hand. Arya, he said, turning to me, go pack a bag, not because you're being kicked out, but because you'll be staying at my guest house. Tomorrow, we implement Plan B. Plan B, Julian echoed, looking worried. Grandpa's smile was cold. Did you really think I'd hand over my life's work without safeguards against vultures like you, Julian? I've been in business longer than you've been alive. You've made a serious miscalculation. By morning, my sadness had hardened into resolve. My mother had made her choice. Now I would make mine. Grandpa arrived at 8 sharp, carrying a thick folder and wearing what his employees called his battle suit. Over breakfast, he revealed that he'd had Julian investigated since the day he proposed to my mother. He slid photos across the table. Julian meeting with executives from Nexuscore. Julian with a woman who wasn't my mother. Julian shaking hands with the CEO known for hostile takeovers. Julian Vance isn't even his real name, Grandpa continued. It's Julian Thorne. His specialty is marrying wealthy women, gaining control of their assets, then disappearing. By noon, I discovered just how aggressive his moves were. When I arrived at Sterling Dynamics headquarters, my access card was denied. I called Dr. Lena Petrova, our CTO, who came down to vouch for me. There's been a memo, she explained, from Julian Vance identifying himself as acting CEO. It said all executive decisions require his approval. The situation was worse than I imagined. Julian had commandeered my father's old office. When I confronted him, he smiled. Arya, good of you to come in. The board has concerns about your experience level. Until those are addressed, I'll be overseeing operations. We'll let the board decide at the emergency meeting I've called for tomorrow, he replied smoothly. For 3 days, this nightmare continued. Julian had changed locks, spread rumors about my emotional stability, and sidelined my supporters. Each night, I came back to the guest house defeated and furious. Each morning, Grandpa would calmly ask, Are you ready to fight back yet? On the 4th day, I finally broke down. They're winning, Grandpa. He's turning everyone against me. Grandpa set aside his newspaper. Are you finished feeling sorry for yourself? This isn't just about Julian. This is your first leadership challenge. How you respond now will define your entire career. You can surrender to a con man, or you can stand up and prove why I chose you. His words stung, but they ignited something in me. What's Plan B? I finally asked. Grandpa smiled, a shark-like grin. I thought you'd never ask. That afternoon, he revealed the ownership documents contained a crucial clause. No financial transactions exceeding $50,000, no hiring or firing of executives, and no structural reorganization could occur without the express written consent of both Arya Sterling and Harrison Sterling. He also revealed that key executives like Lena Petrova and our CFO, David Chen, had been instructed to appear to comply with Julian while documenting everything. They had been waiting for me to fight. The next day, we walked into the emergency board meeting Julian had called. He sat at the head of the table, my mother beside him, looking smug. "Well, we're glad you're here," he said to my grandfather. As I was about to explain, we're facing a delicate transition. He outlined his proposal to take control. "Are there any objections?" he asked, his tone daring anyone to speak. "Yes," I said clearly, standing up. "I object completely." I nodded to our lawyer, who distributed folders to each board member. Inside, you'll find detailed information on Julian Vance, or should I say, Julian Thorne. The color drained from Julian's face as I continued, outlining his history of fraud, his meetings with competitors, his entire scheme. Lena and David stood up to confirm his unauthorized access to confidential files and financial accounts. "This is absurd," Julian sputtered. "These are fabrications." "Everything is verified," our lawyer interjected smoothly, including police reports from 2 ex-wives. My mother stared at photos of Julian with another woman and documentation of money he'd moved from her personal accounts. "Is this true?" she whispered. Before Julian could respond, Grandpa had the final ownership agreement distributed, pointing out the dual signature clause. "So essentially," the board president said, "Julian has no actual authority." "None whatsoever," Grandpa confirmed. "He owns exactly 0% of this company." Julian's facade cracked completely. "You manipulative old man, you set this up." "I protected my company and my granddaughter," Grandpa replied calmly. The vote to formally recognize me as CEO was unanimous. As the meeting concluded, Julian stormed toward the door, hissing at me, "This isn't over. I'm still married to your mother." "Actually, Julian," Grandpa said, stepping between us, "your things have been removed from Alina's house. The locks have been changed, and any transfers you made from company funds have been frozen." For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Security escorted him out. As he was led away, I turned to the board. "I know many of you have concerns about my experience," I said, my voice steady. "But I was raised in this company. I will work harder than anyone to honor my grandfather's legacy." The battle wasn't over. 3 days later, our main competitor, NexusScore, announced a hostile takeover attempt, naming Julian Vance as a special advisor. They were trying to tank our stock price. "Never underestimate a desperate man," Grandpa warned. Instead of fighting a defensive war, I went on the attack. I agreed to a meeting with NexusScore's CEO, Markham Hayes. He arrived with his team and Julian, who looked unbearably smug. "Thank you for coming," I began pleasantly. "Before we discuss your offer, I thought you might want to see something." I played a video on the large screen. It was hidden camera footage from 3 months ago, showing Julian in a hotel bar with Markham Hayes. "I can get you inside information on Sterling's new projects," Julian was saying on the recording. "Once I'm married to Alina, it's just a matter of time." Hayes's face turned to stone. "You told me you had legitimate concerns about their financial stability," he said to Julian. "You said nothing about stolen trade secrets." "Victor, this is obviously doctored," Julian stammered. "We've already filed criminal complaints for corporate espionage and attempted fraud," I interrupted, sliding a copy across the table. "Mr. Vance's advisory role with NexusScore is terminated, effective immediately," Hayes announced, standing up. "And we will be postponing any acquisition discussions." As his team filed out, Julian turned on me, his composure shattered. "You think you've won?" "I still have copies of confidential documents." "Actually, you don't," Lena Petrova said calmly. "Those files you downloaded. We monitored every access. What you have are elaborate fakes we created. Any competitor who acts on that information will be making multi-million-dollar mistakes." The final nail in his coffin. My mother, speaking for the first time, approached him. "The divorce papers have been filed on grounds of fraud. There will be no settlement." Security entered then, accompanied by 2 police officers. "Julian Thorne," one officer said, "we have a warrant for your arrest." As he was led away in handcuffs, the room fell silent. My mother approached me hesitantly. I cut her off with a hug. The anger wasn't gone, but seeing her stand up to him had reminded me she was a victim, too. "We'll work on it, Mom," I said quietly. 3 months later, I was settling into my role. Robert was facing multiple fraud charges and years in prison. My relationship with my mother was slowly healing. The company was thriving under my new leadership. Our first product launch exceeded sales projections by 30%. Grandpa, his health much improved, watched with pride. "You're making decisions I wouldn't have made," he said. "Good decisions. That's when I know I made the right choice." The journey had been painful. But standing on my office balcony, Looking out at the Seattle skyline, I felt a sense of peace. The betrayal had forced me to find a strength I didn't know I possessed. The most important lessons, I realized, are the ones you can't learn in business school. Trust your instincts, but verify everything. Prepare for betrayal without becoming cynical. And family isn't just about blood, but about who stands beside you when it matters most. I now knew with certainty that I was where I belonged, doing exactly what I was meant to do.